asked more than any other is, can my business be franchised? And the honest answer most of the time is probably. However, whether you or your business are ready to franchise is a whole different question.
That's so true, Julie. We get asked that all the time. Most business owners we speak to are strong on 2 or 3 of what we consider to be the 5 foundations required to create a sustainable franchise network.
Mm.
They are commercial proof, operational replicability, leadership readiness, strategic commitment, and personal fit.
And as a business owner, understanding which of those is your strong point is really important, because if you don't get that right and you need to know which of these 5 things you are working with, that can cost you a small fortune if you get it wrong. What the franchise industry presents as a question is, can my business be franchised? The real question is actually, are you and your business ready for what franchising requires?
So important. Let's start with our first foundation, and it's certainly the first of the 5 foundations we use when we work with any client wanting to franchise their business.
Absolutely.
We've found it works over and over across any sector, across any kind of business, whether it's a premises-based business or whether it's a territory-based business. The same criteria are what we apply, and we adapt per model. So the first foundation is commercial proof, and whether there is repeatable evidence that the business is actually profitable, that it has been running for a period of time, that has been tested, and that we've got evidence that the profits are there. So we understand what affordability looks like in that particular model.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I completely get that. But what if you've got a business that it's really a great business concept, and you've got people saying to you, I want you to let me have one of your franchises, but they're in a position where it's not franchised yet, but they're eager to, everybody wants it, so let's get it out there. What do you think happens there?
Well, we do get that quite often, and it takes me back to a particular situation where the nature of the business model, it was a food sector business, but it was a very seasonal model. So it really relied on various seasons for very specific reasons. It had been tested over one season, which did not actually happen to have been a whole year. So where we say you need a year or two's worth of financial figures to make sure this is well established, in this particular case, with the nature of the model having been examined, we found that there was enough evidence to substantiate a call to actually franchise the business. That went hand in hand with the fact that the franchisor was actually ready as well. So he was at a point where he could step into the identity of franchisor. He was ready to lead a group of independent business owners. He understood what the strategic investment was going to be in terms of getting it ready. And he did have a steady stream of people saying, please, there was a huge call for this business in other territories. And it was fairly simple to replicate. We also found that if he hadn't have done that then, there was going to be a stream of copycats that came in, copied what he was doing in a fashion, not everything. Obviously, his recipes and everything were unique to him, but the concept itself was, he would have lost his first user advantage. And so all things considered, we took a decision to franchise that business. It's still a successful business today. And so it was the right decision. And so really what that's saying is that there are exceptions, but you really need to have considered thought applied to that so that you can make sure that you aren't just jumping in far too soon and ahead of making 100% certain that there is enough financial evidence to prove profitability over a period of time.
Absolutely. So what about when you look to replicate the business from an operational perspective?
So the operational side of the business, operational replicability, we really look at there to make sure that the business doesn't depend only on the brilliance of the franchisor. So it mustn't come down to just what's all in his head. That must be transferable into methods, into policies, into procedures, into systems that can run without the operator involved, and that can be then scaled across several locations, of course. So yeah, operational replicability is something that we look at. Often we find at that point when we get to it in the process of franchising the business, we may have to make a few little tweaks. Very often systems aren't quite there. When you're running a franchise network, it's very different to running a single operation. And so what you find is that sometimes you need additional software that's going to handle a much greater level of communication, for example, with everything in one space. Certainly benchmarking, certainly being able to manage performance over a number of different outlets, and having benchmark figures handy at your fingertips. That kind of systems intervention is often required and not there in a pilot operation because it wouldn't need to be there. So at that point, we often we sort of take a pause sometimes, go and find the most appropriate system that's going to work for that particular model, and then ensure that that operational side has been taken care of before we replicate.
Yeah, absolutely. So the unfranchisable bit of the business is often the fact that the franchisor themselves are unfranchisable.
Yeah.
And that kind of looks at the real human part of franchising is where franchise energetics comes in, of course.
Yes.
Our methodology really shines in that particular aspect. So what do you think about how that can, how do you take somebody who's okay leading their business, but then you want to take them into leading a much bigger scaled up version of their business?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Well, that's how life's work, really, isn't it? Franchise Energetics was born because we'd seen too many people doing things that they weren't prepared for and that they hadn't considered. And so, hence the whole Franchise Energetics movement, and certainly the methodology we use, when in every part of our business, not just this part. But leadership readiness is a really important part. And it's something that we work very closely with franchisors on, shifting them from just a single operator practitioner, stepping into the identity of franchisor, what that's going to require. How do they have to show up each day, each month, each year? It's a long-term commitment. This is not something that is short-term. And so there's a lot that needs to be considered. Just think about it from a PR perspective,
Yes,
and they become the voice of the franchise and what have you. And so very often they're not prepared for that.
Yeah.
If they're afraid of the limelight, so to speak, that's often something that's got to be worked on. If there are any limiting beliefs there, that prevent them from actually taking charge of the situation, if they feel that they're not, can't do it, or they're not worthy of it, or, there's a whole lot around franchisor identity that we work with to ensure that they are well equipped to have dealt with that and be able to step into the role of franchisor. And certainly our approach with our clients has been to guide and mentor them really along the way. So we generally don't leave their sides. We're there for the long term. It's not just a contracted product and then off we go. And it's one of the things that ensures that they always have somebody to come back to ask questions, to, for that guidance and reassurance sometimes.
But sometimes they don't even know that they have limiting beliefs, or that they have any of those problems that we've just spoken about. So it's really important that people come to franchising understanding how the business works, how they work, where's the gap that we have to fill.
Absolutely. It's certainly our point of uniqueness, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Again, we go back to our franchise energetics methodology and what we bring to the party as far as that's concerned, because it's not just the procedures and the transactions that are involved in creating a franchise. The human is key and critical to the whole process. And so we've seen that over decades across so many different countries, certainly different business sectors. There's always a human involved somewhere. And, it's worth making sure that that human is well prepared to take on the role.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's move on now to the costs involved.
Yeah.
If somebody wants to franchise their business, what are their costs? Because sometimes we see, franchise your business for £1,000 and you've got everything there that you need. Well, I struggle with that because I think, if it costs you what, £3,000 nowadays for a franchise agreement, you need to spend time and energy and money and on getting your ops manual ready. You may or may not have consultancy costs. Um, what what would you say to somebody who's really trying to work out what the real cost is to doing this?
Well, Julie, there's a lot of myth out there. We look at this as our fourth foundation, our strategic commitment foundation,
Mm,
where we delve into what it's going to cost to set this business up,
mm,
firstly,
mm,
and dispel the myth that franchising is, using other people's money to expand your business. That happens down the line,
yeah.
but certainly for the development of those stores. But before you can get to taking on a franchisee, you have to have invested in your strategic infrastructure. So, as
Absolutely.
you've mentioned, there are operations manuals, there are systems, there is your strategic advisory panel that you have around you. So, we always sort of say you've got to get the foundations right. If you get the foundations right in any business, you can build it into a huge empire.
Mm,
But get the foundations wrong and you are shaky from the start, you run the risk of the whole thing collapsing. So that's sort of, I haven't considered anything. I've just done a copy and paste job. I asked ChatGPT for a few pointers, and I think I know what to do. I copy and pasted somebody else's franchise agreement, and it hasn't been considered, and I'm just going to get going. Well, you and I both know how that fails, and how many clients we've taken on because there was a big mess created and we had to
mm,
fix it. So the best advice I can give anybody at this stage is take considered advice. Um, it's a big long-term commitment that you're taking on, and it requires, it deserves some strategic analysis, really some considered thought into what it's really going to take to franchise. So that long-term strategic commitment and the costs involved in getting it to the point where you can sell the first franchise is often underestimated, and it's not necessarily conveyed in some of these do-it-yourself operations, put things together quickly.
If I go back to my estate agency days,
Yeah.
and I just thought then of a really sort of what I think might be a good analogy, but
Yeah.
you see what you think. So if you build a house, yeah, you've got to dig down, you've got to build the foundations, you've got to spend time and money on something that nobody's ever going to see
Yeah.
to build that house for. Then on the surface, whatever you build it with, wood, brick, whatever, that's going to stand firm because you've got those foundations. It's going nowhere. If you've got a franchise and you just don't have any foundations, you just build what everybody can see, before very long, that's going to fall over. Is that a good analogy or
It is
not?
a good analogy. And to take it one step further, you're using that specific analogy. Um, you've got to begin with the end in mind. When you are
Yeah.
building foundations for a single story house, the foundations look very different to whether you're building a multi-story house.
Yes.
So in franchising, if you were just building a local network, that your foundations might look slightly different to whether you're building a national network, and certainly would look very different if you're building it for an international market. And so,
True.
and the same goes for what your end game is and taking that into consideration. So are you eventually pitching this whole business for a buyout? Are you pitching it for long-term growth and expansion internationally? Because
Mhm.
how you intend ending up affects what you do now in the foundational stage, and making key critical errors in these foundational stages, not considering all the aspects that need to be considered, can cost you dearly down the line. Really can. So, yeah, that's a great analogy, Julie. A really good one.
Let's talk about our final foundation.
Yeah.
And it's often very underestimated.
Yes.
Comes in a little bit with the leadership one, but
Mhm.
not entirely. This is looking at it from a different angle, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it is. So it would be the personal fit. It's the final foundation in our 5 foundations methodology. And here we look very much at the character and the temperament of the franchisor, and what their propensity is to lead teams, and to do what it's going to take in order to get the business to where it needs to go, where they're at in terms of outsourcing certain elements, because as you know, when you start out, you are all things to all people. You run very lean teams, and it does take a lot of dedication and commitment and time and effort. And so where are they at in their lives? Are they able to dedicate what's going to need to be dedicated to that? Have they got a good support structure around them? Are they good with people? You mentioned before that you're not creating a whole different business where you are coaching, guiding, training people rather than just getting on with the business of the day. And that often can run amiss. So we have to make sure that in this final foundation, that the personal fit that has been considered, and that every aspect of that is accounted for when franchising the business, basically.
I think the reason I really like our franchise fit matrix is because it shows very clearly whether a business can be franchised, but whether you are the right person to do that as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's really something that I'm very keen to share that with people as we go through our sort of putting this human into franchising aspect together. What are your thoughts around how that?
Well, I agree with you. I think it is. We have developed that over decades of working in the sector, over so many different business sectors. And we've found it's proved itself over and over and over again. So yeah, absolutely. Applying the franchise fit matrix to this aspect of franchising your business is hugely valuable. And it certainly highlights where there are any areas that need help and work and focus, shall we say. If you think that you are ready to franchise your business, and you think your business is ready to be franchised, or perhaps you're not ready, perhaps you are undecided, you would be well advised to download the Franchise Readiness Assessment Guide. There's a link below. It's free of charge. Go through that, work through all the aspects. It certainly takes you through all the foundations we've spoken about. There's some points to reflect on, some questions that you need to ask yourself. And that is a really good place to start. So if you are thinking that maybe this is something you want to consider, I would go there, I'd download the guide, work through it. If you need some help or assistance, by all means, book a free clarity call with us. We can work through and see what stage you're at. It'll be an honest account of what we feel. Not all businesses are ready, and we're not afraid to say that they're not ready and that people aren't ready either. So we do have those kind of honest conversations of saying, this is not something we would entertain.
I think our own sort of personalities come into that as well. We've got a very straight talking South African.
Yes, we do.
And we've got a Yorkshire lass.
Yes.
Both of us say what we think.
Yes.
So if we think somebody's business is not ready or can't be franchised for whatever reason, we will say no.
Absolutely.
Equally, I have had occasions when I've spoken to people who are not ready to be a franchisor. They're not franchisable.
Yeah.
I can think of one example in particular. I had a guy call me and he said he wanted to franchise his business. I said, all right, okay, tell me a little bit about it. And then as the conversation went along, he didn't want to be involved in the franchising of his business. He wanted me to do it. And I said, no, that's not how it works. You need to understand that you've got to do all the work to get the franchise. You've got to be coached into that franchisor identity, as you said.
Yes.
And he gave me all sorts of but what if, but it was always what if you do it and then show me what you've done. I just said, no. That's not going to work. And to my knowledge, he hasn't done it. but I wouldn't do it with him. So,
Certainly,
it's not.
those kinds of decisions are almost unquantifiable.
Yeah, yeah.
As is making mistakes in these early days. And we've both had clients who've come to us after having appointed the first 5 or even 7 franchises. They've appointed franchisees. Their foundations have not been solidly sort of stacked. They haven't considered all the aspects. There are holes in the franchise agreement. They haven't got a proper onboarding process. The training is next to nothing. Just come and watch me, and hopefully you understand what goes on. And at that stage, have realized this is a much bigger deal than they ever anticipated it would be.
Yeah.
And you can't know that if you don't know what questions to ask when you're doing your research. And those are costly errors. We both know of people who've had to buy back businesses. All 7 of the first ones had to buy back because they had such bad foundations. And yet the business model was just bursting to come through. Great business model, just very badly put together because they didn't consider the whole process from the beginning.
I think kind of going back to the human bit there as well, if you think about it, if you're going to set up your franchise business and other people are going to invest their money in, making this brand grow, if you like, because they're going to be in various different towns. If you've not got it built right, you're using their money to fail.
Yeah.
And that's not fair.
It's not fair. It's not ethical.
No.
It's really not.
No.
And so, yeah, a very, very good point, in terms of understanding what the model requires. And, the essence across all franchises is to create a win-win. Franchisors have to win as much as franchisees do. And if you can't find the win-win in the model, there is no franchise model.
No.
One-sided franchise agreements, one-sided franchise models fall over every time. So it's one of those things that when you're looking at it, you've got to create that win-win and be able to establish consistency across your network. If you can't get that right, again, you have a model that is very unstable. You've got confused marketing messages. People don't know how to deliver on those. Inconsistency in a network that hasn't been well considered also destroys networks. So
it does, and destroys people and lives in the process.
And that's the problem. And that's where franchise energetics came from, because we've seen far too much of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. So, guys, what I would suggest you do is have a look at the Franchise Readiness Assessment Guide, because it really is a useful tool and it's free. So why not? We like to make sure that we've got the human element there, but there is the practical side of it as well. And hopefully that will help.
Remember, behind every franchise agreement, there is a human story.
And when we take time to understand the human, we make better franchise decisions.
We do. That's so true.